In the 2018 season premiere of Love and Hip Hop Miami, Amara La Negra became a global icon when she defended her Afro Latin identity after being ridiculed by Cuban producer Young Hollywood.
So I can't be elegant if I have a fro.
Yeah, I guess so. Ah, man, they're gonna attack me for that.
Mira, Hollywood es un estúpido. Being an Afro Latina, I think I embrace it as much as
Afro
possible.
Latina. Elaborate. Are you African, or is that just because you have an afro?
You see that brainwashed mentality that I'm talking about? Hello? You're only a couple of shades lighter than me, like by this much.
At the end of the day, in the music industry, they're looking for cookie cutter poster child.
So, where are the women that look like myself? You must do good music, huh?
Unfortunately, due to decades of erasure in the media, Amara La Negra has had to justify and explain her Afro-Latin identity and duality to members of the Latin American community and to members of the African American community.
What are you?
Huh?
Like race-wise?
Oh, okay.
What am I?
Yeah, like, what are you? No, I'm Dominican. Well, born and raised in Miami. My parents are Dominican, and I am obviously an Afro Latina. So yes.
That turned
so
into a
both your
huge
parents
deal.
are Dominican?
Yes, both of my parents are Dominican.
So what is an Afro Latina? I thought that was half black, half something else.
That's what I thought it was too. I thought it was half black, half Latino.
Well, the thing is that how we see black here in the United States is different. You think black, you think African American.
Right.
See, for us in Dominican Republic, because we're all Dominican, you only have but to say you're black.
You
can
remember
always
we had
just say you're a
Dasha
Latino
Polanco
with
up
an
here?
afro.
Yeah, I can say I'm Latino. I'm Latina.
With an afro.
Even if I had an afro, I didn't have an afro. I mean, I'm still Afro Latina because I come from African descent. So that's what it is.
The term Afro-Latin became popular in the 1970s, and it refers to people of African descent in Mexico, South and Central America, and the Spanish-speaking Caribbean. And by extension, it also refers to people of African descent in the United States whose origins are in Latin America and in the Caribbean. Although roughly 25% of Latinos in Latin America and in the Caribbean self-identify as Afro-Latin, Afro-Latins have extremely limited media presence. Critics have accused the Latin American media of erasing Afro-Latins in favor of European Latin Americans, especially in telenovelas, which are Latin American soap operas.
Hi, my name is Dr. Dielka Thompson Edwards. I was born in a former canal zone, Republic of Panama, and I visited the U.S. many times as a child, but actually emigrated to the U.S. as a transfer sophomore to attend college. Even growing up, I didn't see anyone that looked like me. My parents used to really amuse themselves when they'd hear me saying I wanted to be a doctor. They would say, oh, maybe next month she wants to be a flight attendant or something, but I pretty much stayed the course, and they realized that, but there wasn't a role model.
I am from Dominican Republic. I'm an Afro Latina. I'm 24 years old. Growing up, I really didn't see a lot of Afro Latinas in television, and it kind of upsetted me because of the simple fact that you can tell that colorism is an issue. So growing up, I always saw kind of like light-skinned people, you know, like from Colombia or from Ecuador and stuff like that, but I never saw kind of like an Afro Latina in television. So growing up, I always used to ask my mom, like, Mom, why isn't there anybody of color in television? Or, you know, people like us, like from Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Costa Rica, you know, kind of like the Caribbean island. And the response my mother gave me was, you know, they have a preference. When she told me that kind of like the filming industry was kind of like they had a preference, I said, well, what preference is that? And she told me it was kind of like more light skin. More kind of like Jennifer Lopez, more like Mariah Carey, more like, you know, all the little light-skinned people, the light-skinned people that you see in television.
A study conducted at the University of Michigan in 2012 concluded that a lack of representation in the media leads to low self-esteem in boys and girls of color. Dr. Nicole Martins, who teaches at Indiana University, said that there's a term known as symbolic annihilation, which is the idea that if you don't see people like you in the media that you consume, then you must somehow be unimportant.
The lack of visibility affects Afro-Latina people in the sense that, like, for me specifically, I would use my life as an example. Growing up, I didn't really know, I I mean, I guess you could say label myself, but like I didn't really know where I fit in because I felt like I didn't really fit in with like African Americans. I didn't feel like I really fit in with Latinos, and you know, trying to figure out who you are, your identity as a person, and like I think it definitely matters. Representation matters because it helps with your self-esteem when you see that just skinny white is what's in or what's beautiful, then that definitely affects your self-esteem growing up or even as an adult into adulthood. So I think that it definitely matters so that, you know, we have children and adults who are proud to be who they are and have great self-esteem. So I think that it definitely affects us.
The lack of Afro-Latinx representation really sort of always made me feel like we didn't belong, like there wasn't a place for us here, and like we had no history here in this country.
In an interview with Telesur, Natalie Tejada, the founder of Tingo Grita Fuerte, an organization dedicated to the cultural, spiritual, and human rights for Afro women, said that the images that Latin American media projects to itself and to the world are often racially skewed and biased visions of the Latin American communities. Afro-descended women, we don't understand the term, Tejada said. We just carry the physical features. The media doesn't represent us. We are whore. We are in the kitchen in telenovelas, but we want to be queen.
I came into sort of my realization of being Black and Afro Latina in college, right? Growing up in New York City and the Bronx among other Dominicans in Washington Heights, I never felt out of place. I never had to question who I was. I was just Dominican. And college was the first space where both Latinos and non-Latinos and Latinx folks were questioning my identity and how I identified. Like they couldn't always tell that I was Latina up until they heard me speak Spanish. And when they did hear me speak Spanish, they were like, "I thought you were Black," or "Where are you from? What are you?" And that definitely caused a lot of confusion for me because it was the first time that people were questioning how I identified. And it wasn't until I came to understand like Dominican colonial and slave history, right, and the transatlantic slave trade, and the relations between DR and Haiti and the role that the U.S. played and all that, that I sort of began to sort of develop this understanding of like a diasporic Black identity that is all over the world, including the Spanish Caribbean and other parts. And so that process of realizing, oh, this is my history, this is my legacy, this is what I'm a part of, sort of helped me understand a little better about how I identify, how I navigate this world.
So I went to Florida International University, and there was definitely a lot of representation there. Like there was a large Afro-Latina community, very proud Afro-Latina community. There was also a very large Haitian community there. So like in my university, I felt very represented. I felt very comfortable there saying I'm Afro-Latina.
I'm a doctor by training, and most of my career has been in the oncology pharmaceutical industry, as I found myself in the U.S. several times in the very unique position of being the only Black physician in the room or in a conference call, many times to the astonishment of my peers who may have had only communication with me via email, not even phone calls, and then they would meet me and you'd see them make adjustments about who they thought I might be. So that was always a bit amusing at times, but it also sometimes created the situation that you did not fit the expected boxes. You actually clicked several boxes that they may not have imagined this person that they were corresponding with to be, i.e., obviously female, but Black, female, bilingual, highly educated, well-traveled, well-spoken. So it amused me, and it also unfortunately saddened me because many times I would attend conferences and hope to find someone that really looked like me or represented what I knew that we are out there, but it was in such small numbers. We were a drop in a bucket.
Recently, activists like Dr. Janaina Oliveira have made efforts to share the importance of Afro-Latin representation in film. Dr. Oliveira studies Afro-Brazilian film and believes that representation in film can be used to unite Afro-diasporic communities across the world.
Show films, people show a real interest to learn more about Brazil and more specifically about the presence of Afro-Brazilian culture in cinema, or of the question of the issue of race in Brazil, because people so far they still have that image that Brazil is a racial democracy, what is not. But I think as diaspora people here, we are more connected in terms of the issues that we face every day in terms of race, social policies, and all this kind of stuff. So I think here people feel more close to the issues in Brazil.